Hello and welcome to this Android Reverse tutorial brought to you by North Border Software. My name is Gary and this is part 7 of the series looking at how to do reverse geocoding within Android. This will be the final part as well, where we finish up the method where we make a call to the Google Maps API and we'll get a JSON response and we'll pass that JSON response to get the formatted address. So really we're just looking to complete this particular method here. This is the only bit of outstanding code to do. That said, there is a fair amount of coding still left to do. So the first thing to consider is the HTTP call itself. Just want to draw your attention to the Android developers website here. You'll notice that if we want to continue to use the Apache HTTP clients, then that's a legacy function now, so we can still use it. These changes were made in Android 6 or Marshmallow, but anything legacy really probably means it's becoming end of life. In fact, the default HTTP client's already been deprecated, so we're really looking for a much more modern, better supported alternative. So what I'm going to do is use OkHttp, and that's at this particular website here. You can get all the information that you need. So just go to this particular URL. What we want to do first of all is actually get the libraries into our Gradle file. And all we'll need to do is actually copy this line here. So always go to the website and get the latest version. This will give you a look at what we need to import there. So I'm just going to actually just physically copy that. Just before we move on from this, there are two different types of call we can do with OkHttp. There's a asynchronous call which could be used on the main user interface, and it has kind of an inbuilt async task there, so it won't lock that interface up. The synchronous call, if we used it as is on the main user interface, would actually lock the interface up. But what we have our intent service class, which we created, and that runs in the background off the main user interface. So we can use the simpler code associated with the synchronous call. We'll just insert the code into the fetch intent service class itself. So, well, first of all, I just want to make sure I've got this actually copied. And what we'll do, we'll just go to the Android Studio project, and I want to call up the Gradle file here. And in that Gradle file, we'll just need to just insert the line here, and it'll just ask us to sync the project. Okay, so now that's resynchronized, we can actually focus on the actual coding itself. So the way I'm going to deal with the OkHttp coding is just to create an inner class. So I'm just going to call it get HTTP. I'm just going to create an instance of this yet to be completed class. Just call it Google Maps API. Just be new get HTTP. Okay, so obviously I've got an error here, so just get the Android Studio just to create an inner class for us. Okay, so it should have just inserted some code down here. I'll make this a public class because we are going to be making some calls to the outside world, so I'll just make it public. Okay, so what we'll do now, we'll get the URL string defined, and then we'll go on to complete the coding for the public class here. So if you remember in the last tutorial, we did look at the URL. I've got it physically here, so obviously all we need to do is actually insert our own device's location here. in place of here. So actually, I think just to cut a bit of typing down, I'll probably just copy most of this, and then we'll just make those particular modifications. Okay, so I'm just going to define a string under here. I'm just going to call it URL. I'm just going to copy most of this in. So what we need to do is just modify the location elements. Okay, just format that code. And you see I just deleted the predefined latitude and longitude, and I just inserted location.get latitude and location.longitude. So when we pass this URL to the OkHttp client, we will have the current location of device inserted into the URL. Okay, so what I want to do now is just fill out the coding really for the get HTTP class. Probably best thing to do is just insert that code, and then we'll just review the response. It's actually going to be based on the code in the website here. So this is a synchronous call. So I'm really just by and large going to copy most of this, but we'll just get it typed in anyway. Okay, so let's just take a closer look to what I've actually done here. First of all, we need to do is just create an instance of the OkHttp client. The next thing we've done is actually define this method called run. It's going to return a string. The string will actually be the response to the HTTP call, so it would be the body in this case of the website itself. So it would be just the pure JSON elements for the API call. We're not interested in the header or any other information at all. So we want that body back in form of a string. We'll associate it with the response. So the other thing to consider is this builder really. So essentially when we initiate the class, we'll here we will call Google API maps. Let's just change the type in there. So it'll be Google API maps dot run. We'll initiate the call to the URL. So this is where we insert the URL in. And we've built this request, so when we issue the .run method, it will then return the response back in the form of a string. So sounds a bit confusing, but it's actually very standard format of code for the HTTP client here. So we need to just go on and do that now, just to initiate the call to the HTTP. So that's the next set of code we need to do. So let's just get back to okay, I've just accidentally shut down the fetch internet class. Let's just draw that back. Okay, so what we're interested in is just carrying on here. So just going to actually make the call now to the OkHttp client. So what I can say is response. Remember we pre-built those string variables in the original tutorial. So response is our string variable, and it'd be equal to Google Maps API, and it'd be .run, and it'll be URL. So that's what we actually need to initiate this call to the OkHttp client. So you'll see here it's throw in an error, what we need to do is just surround this with a try and a catch. So from that perspective, that's what we need to do for the HTTP call. So hopefully you followed all of that. We'll initiate the call, and we're going to just populate this string with the response, the body response with the JSON element. So what we need to do now is actually push that response into a JSON object, and we can then start parsing that JSON object to get the formatted address, and that's what we're specifically interested in. Okay, so first thing we need to do is create a JSON object. So let's just write a couple of notes here as to what we're doing. That'll be a JSON object. So we need to create that first of all. So it'll be we'll just call it JSON object. Sorry, yeah, we'll just JSON object and equal new. We'll just call it JSON object actually. Equals, and it'll be a new JSON object. Okay. So what we'll do with that, we'll pass the response into that JSON object. So we'll go JSON object. It'll be new JSON object, and inside that we need to pass the response. Okay, so this too is going to ask for a try and a catch, so let's just add that in. Okay, so we don't need to do anything with the catch here. So the next thing I want to do is do you remember when we looked at the JSON response itself, there was an object right at the bottom there called status. So I really only want to parse this array if the status is okay. So that's the next thing I want to do is just get the status of the actual response itself, and just check that it's actually okay. So I'm going to define a string status, and we'll search the JSON object for the I guess the value associated with the key of status, and check that it's okay. Okay, so that's the coding we need to do. It's just we're just going to define a string status. We're going to look for the in the JSON objects, we're going to get the string status, which is the key associated with the object, and we'll get that first of all. Again, it's just going to ask for a try and a catch, so let's just surround that with a try and a catch. We're just going to do all the work within the try now. So now we just need to check the result is okay. So let's just put an if in here. So if status, we'll say we're not interested in the case. Let's just you know, just check that, or just ignore the case really. So equals ignore case, but it'd be okay. That's what we're interested in, and we'll only proceed to actually go and get the formatted address if things are okay. So what we do now is we want to get the results array. Remember, there's several portions to the results array. So we're actually going to get the first index. So that'll be index 0, which will be the first address. But we need to go and find the results array first of all. So I need to define a JSON array. And I'm going to call it results. And it's within JSON object, which we defined and passed the response to. So we're just looking for the JSON array results within that. So we're looking for the the keywords results. Okay, so we've got to make sure these values in green are actually typed very accurately, otherwise we will miss the results. So what we do need to do now is get the first set of results only. So we're just interested in looking for the index of 0. So just put a little note here to see what we're doing. I'm going to get first object. In other words, just one address. Okay, so yeah, so that's what we'll go on to do now. So I need to define another object now, and I'm just going to call this JSON 0. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is actually get the formatted address. So we've been digging inside this array, which has got nested arrays and nested objects, so it's quite convoluted to actually get to where we want to be, but this is where we're going to get to now. So I'm just going to define another string. I'm going to call this something like address Google API or something like that. So let's just define a string. I should just call it formatted address through the API. And what we need to do is just look inside JSON 0, and we need to get the string, and we're looking for formatted address. That's the key we're interested in. We're going to get the value associated with that and put it into the formatted address. So the key we're interested in is formatted address. If you remember it from the previous tutorial. So just to make sure these are 100% correct in terms of the type in, which this one is. So we just need to type to string. Okay, so that actually is all we need to do to actually get the formatted address. So the other things we need to do now we've got the formatted address. I'll just put a login to the screen, and then we just deliver the result to the receiver. So let's just put a log message in there so we know really what's going on on the console, and we'll just put a tag in there, and the message is something like address found using Google Maps API. Okay, and so we need to just then deliver that to the receiver. So deliver results to receiver. Now we're going to use the success code to identify that we use the Google Maps API. So that'll be the one there, and we need to just pass the formatted address in that case. So that'll be formatted address API. So what we'll do with the catch portion here, we also want to pass the failure result over. So let's just define an error message, and that will be error message. And we'll set that equal to something like Google Maps API failed, something like that. Okay, and we'll deliver that back to receiver with a failure code, the failure results, and it'll be error message. So it's just one thing I need to do back into the try section itself. I need to just set the Boolean flag to true for the address found. So let's just make sure we get that in. So it'll be address found equal to true. Okay, so actually in terms of coding, that's all we need to physically do. One thing I would make you aware of is when I was testing the geocoder on the emulator in between these tutorials, it just started to work properly. I haven't got an explanation for that, but I think we need to use that fact, and we can do some testing on the emulator here. What it would be useful to do actually is just set another Boolean flag for testing. What I want to be able to do is actually on when we want to just bypass the code here. So I'm just going to set up another Boolean flag, and we're just going to modify the if statement there. So we could put something like just something like test API. That's what we'll call it test API, and set that equal to false. So let's just do that now. So it'll be private Boolean test API, but we're going to set that equal to false. So set to true only when you to test so only set that to true when you want to test the Google Maps API. So what we'll do, or we'll just go into the into this geocoder here, and we'll just say if we say it'll be not test API. So if you put that in there, if this value is false, then it's just going to ignore this statement, just look for the geocoder being present. If we set this to true, then irrespective of the geocoder being present, we're always going to bypass this code and just fall back to the API. So in terms of coding, really that's everything we need to do. I think what we probably would be useful really is just to just have a quick review of the actual code itself. So what we did first of all was we just wanted to focus on this method itself here. So we set up the HTTP client using OkHttp, and we put the code associated with that into this public class here. So we're going to pass the URL in the form of a string with the current device's location into this, and it's going to return the body back in the form of a string, which would be the JSON response. What we did then, we needed to create a number of JSON arrays and JSON objects. First of all, we wanted to check that the status was okay. We'll only execute the code if the status is okay. If it is okay, what we want to do is look for the formatted address for the first and only address. We're not interested in the second and third addresses there. So and then when we've got that, we'll just pass this back to the results receiver. So I'm just going to alter that spelling there. And that's essentially all we needed to do. What I'll do now, we'll just go on and test this on the emulator. So we'll just see you back in a few seconds when the emulator's loaded. Okay, so I've got the emulator loaded. What I want to do, we said we'd use this as an example, isn't it? So let's just seed these particular locations into the emulator itself. So this is the latitude. So let's just paste that in there, and let's just get this longitude value. So if you remember, this was Rodney Road in London. So let's just send those off. You can see that's gone in there now. So let's just hit the button. We've got Rodney Road, and that was indicated that it was found using the geocoder, because we've got this message here, address found. So what I'll do, I'm just going to run this again, but I'm just going to change the this value to true. Okay, so we'll just run this again. We'll just make sure we get the longitude and latitude in there. So now it's say address found using Google Maps API, so it's 201 Rodney Road. So that's an excellent result. And the only other thing I need to test now is when we actually turn the internet off. So we're bypassing the geocoder now. So let's just go into the app settings, and we're just looking for more here. Let's just put this into flight mode, so that'll just turn off Wi-Fi and the phone itself. And let's just rerun the app itself. So reverse geocoder, and let's just have a go now. Hit the button. Geocoder failed and no internet access. So that's looking good. I think overall that's been a pretty comprehensive overview of two techniques to do reverse geocoding within Android. We looked at the geocoder itself and an alternative method using an API call to the Google Maps itself, and just passing the JSON response. So you can use one or both of those methods as you see fit in your own particular project. So hope you found this one useful, and catch you in the next set. Bye for now. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you find this tutorial useful. All the project files and source code are available for download on my website. Thank you.